encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast on which we discuss all things preaching and ministry. We're coming to you from the Sports Center on campus at Freed-Hardeman University in the middle of the annual Bible lectureship that takes place here in February in lovely Henderson, Tennessee. So you may hear the dull roar of people passing by, or there may be hecklers who come by from time to time to try and derail us today, but we're excited to be here. And we're excited to address another listener-requested topic on this episode, getting out of a preaching rut. Here to help us discuss that, we're welcoming back Steve Higginbotham, who preaches for the Carnes Church of Christ in the Knoxville, Tennessee area and works with the Southeast Institute of Biblical Studies. I always have to think about
I know.
Welcome back. How you doing?
Great. It's good to be with you again.
It is great to have you with us. How's your health? How you doing health-wise?
Doing well. I finished up my treatments in September.
Good.
And after 2 years of them. And,
finished them. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
No more MD Anderson trips?
Well, I have to go down every 3 months for follow-up with them. They do scans, and my scans are all good. And I go back next month for another scan, so things are going great.
We're rejoicing with you all with that.
Thank you.
I mean, that is so wonderful, and grateful that treatments and everything have been well too, right? I mean, you seem to have responded really well to that.
The immunotherapy is not, I feel very fortunate. I see the effects of chemo and radiation, and it's really a hard route. But the immunotherapy, I had very little side effects, and it worked really well.
Oh, so grateful for that. We're talking about preaching ruts.
Yeah.
These things happen.
They do.
No one is immune to a rut of a preaching rut.
Right.
How do you, can we define the terms or characterize it a little bit just so everybody's clear what we're talking about?
Well, there are times when you feel dry, you feel like you've said everything you need to say, and there are times when you just, I don't know, it just sounds like you're doing the same thing every week, mm-hmm. Or at least you think, maybe they think, that you're not stretching yourself. And my dad preached 50 years at one congregation, and I have often thought, how do you not get in a rut, with that? Preaching the same things, is it fresh every time? Your change of illustrations, all those kind of things. It would be hard not to, be found, oh, yeah, we've heard this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And, hopefully drawing some off his experience, and I know you've had some extended tenures in various places. How long have you been at Carnes now, by the way?
We've been there 12 years, and I was in Glasgow for 21 years.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, good. Well, we picked the right guy for the job here on that.
What, you think I get in ruts? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying you know how to help us out of them.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, well, this interview has gone badly so far. The dryness that we feel, it can be a spell or a season. It's not just like, well, I'm up here in the middle of this sermon and 15 minutes in, I feel like I'm out of material. This is like, maybe for a month or whatever. It's probably kind of akin to burnout in some ways, right?
Sometimes you just don't feel it. And even there are, I prepare my sermons toward the end of the week, because if I do them on Monday, I don't want to do them by the weekend.
Right.
And
you don't want to have to preach them come Sunday.
Yeah. So there is this, I don't know, it's a phenomenon or whatever, but you just, sometimes you go through the motions almost. You're not feeling it when you're doing it. So that's a problem. We need to get out of that because we need to preach with passion. And if the passion isn't there, we're probably not going to be very effective.
So, absolutely. Lest we beat ourselves up too much, as we said at the top of the show, right? This is common to all men.
Yeah.
This stuff happens, and we've all been there where we have to preach through things in spite of the way that we feel.
Exactly.
I've prayed many a Nehemiah-like prayers on the front row, during the scripture reading before I'm supposed to get up and preach. Whether it's physical illness, I'm just not feeling good, or something somebody said moments before, or I just feel like I'm in a rut right now.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So we're focused more on the positive of this, right? How can we be proactive in getting out of a preaching rut? And you've got some notes here. I see 6 points. So
I do. I
is
have
this
6
points?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
God rested on the 7th, and I'm stopping with 6 too.
Okay. Well, where do we begin? What's number one?
Well, when I get in those ruts where I just feel dry and am searching for something to say, I read. And usually when I reflect, I haven't been reading, I haven't been studying, I've been busy doing other things.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do a lot of good without doing preaching, and we've got to prioritize. If we're doing good, but we don't leave ourselves enough time to prepare our sermons, we've not done good. We have to choose better things. And so I think that by reading or listening to other guys, it's going to keep you fresh. You're going to hear new ideas. You're going to hear just nuggets of truths that, I can make a sermon out of that. Mm-hmm. And so I really recommend that I talk to the guys in the School of Preaching a lot, but I recommend listen to other guys preach. Yeah. Find someone you really like and listen to them regularly. Get pointers from them. Sometimes I even go to, I used to go to libraries, but recently I do it online. But just go to Amazon and look at religious titles of books. Yeah. And sometimes those titles will spawn sermon ideas and that I could do something. And so I sometimes peruse titles for fresh ideas and approaches. I've got some preachers that I like to listen to in the sermons that they do weekly, and just reading and studying. I think that'll get you out of that rut. Mm-hmm. Help you anyway.
Some weeks, I know I've felt in the rut just because of the tyranny of the urgent almost,
Yes,
So I'm sure I've told this story on the podcast. I remember when I first started preaching thinking this is going to be great because I can dedicate the majority of my time to preparing sermons and Bible classes. And up to that point, I had been a full-time student while also preaching on the weekends, and so I had felt the strain on my time. Yeah. Often I would get in the pulpit and feel like, I wish I could have had more time to prepare for this. But then I started, I think it was like week 3 of full-time ministry, congregational ministry, that I realized that's not what happens.
Yeah.
That's not the luxury. So you have to find ways to set up healthy boundaries.
You do.
And sometimes that means you get up earlier, or if you're so inclined, you stay up later. And then, if you have a family, then you have to figure that out. So that can be difficult.
It is difficult, and I have not mastered the word no. That is really hard for me to say.
Me either.
Yeah.
As the presence of this podcast attests.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So listen to others, just read and study.
Yeah. That will keep your mind fresh, and you'll have fresh material ideas to build off of. Mm-hmm.
And that's why prioritizing stuff like the event where we are right now and others like it, lectureships, seminars, things like that. And it's really good if you have the luxury of taking the week and just sort of coming apart for a while.
Yeah.
You can just focus on maybe re-energizing a little bit. Okay, good. But hey, YouTube and Facebook and if we want to talk about good things out of the pandemic, more and more places have live streamed and all that.
Yeah,
you have access to sermons if you need.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good. All right, what's number 2? Where do we go next?
I think one of the things that helps me is I change presentation styles from time to time. I will, it's not necessarily a presentation style, but the way, the type of sermon that I deliver. I like to go retro. and use some old styles. The people are familiar with them. Like, oh, I remember when they used to do. Like, I have, I don't know, maybe 50 sheet sermons that my dad made. I remember sitting as a child playing cars on the basement floor, and my dad down with a yardstick and, markers doing these sheets.
How did they do that back then?
Yeah.
Anyway, we need to do an episode where we talk about how they did it back in the day.
But I've got those sheet sermons, and I'll use, preach from a sheet sermon. And just the oddity of it, makes people, and then they reminisce and they, I remember I heard so-and-so do that once, and
so
it just
you set up the sheet in the auditorium, or do you take a picture and put it on the screen?
Well, I've done both.
Okay.
Sometimes I've taken a picture and just put it on the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
and I use it that way. Sometimes we've hung them. But so that's one thing. I've actually done a flannel board series. And, of course, the flannel board's not big enough at our congregation. So it was really fun doing, because my wife and I went into the teacher resource room, and we got all these little flannel board pieces out and set them up. And I took a picture, and then we'd rearrange them for the next and took a picture.
So that was like each slide, each picture.
Yeah.
Wow.
And older people remember, I remember when I was a kid that we had flannel board lessons, and then the young people today were like totally engaged, because, that's something interesting and unique too. And so that caused a lot of, excitement and buzz with that. My daughter's an artist, and so we did blackboard sermons. And she, drew a lion and a bear on one of them, that was something different. We've done film strips, on a series with film strips, and so it just the break through the year, just hitting some things, throwing back to memories. It engages people. Yeah,
that is so neat. What a neat idea, and it engages a different portion of your brain almost that may reignite the flame a little bit.
Yeah. And it's kind of, because you don't do it very often, it's kind of exciting for you to do it and to present it. And you see the reaction that the people have, and it's just, it's a good move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Go play around in the teacher's resource room a while, but don't put things out of place.
No,
or that one
put
lady,
it back.
she's not going to be pleased with you. Everybody has that teacher's resource lady, and she does a good and important work.
Yes, she does.
What's number 3?
Well, I think that I look at things, or try to look at things differently, or from a different angle a lot, and one of the things that I think is really interesting to do, and I try to use it in my Bible study constantly, my private study, is to look at a story, but look at it over somebody else's shoulder, instead of like the main character in the narrative. And what it'll do, how many times have we preached the story of Joseph, being sold into slavery, and the lessons that we learn. Everybody can just almost tune out and say, yeah, we know the Joseph story, and we know the lessons that are going to follow. The fleeing from sin, and we know the forgiveness that Joseph extended his brothers, and we have the lesson on the providence of God, and those are your standard lessons whenever you're going to talk about Joseph. But that's talking about Joseph from his perspective. But if you look at the story through the eyes of his brothers, you talk about different things. Like with Joseph, 2 times when the trouble started with Benjamin and, having him come and then finding the cup in his luggage, 2 times the brothers say, well, I knew it. We were going to get in trouble. This is all because of what they've been living a decade with guilt over what they had done. And as soon as something bad happened to them, they recalled that instance a decade earlier.
Yeah.
And so the story of Joseph can be about guilt. if you tell the story through the eyes of the brothers.
Yeah.
And it just gives you a whole different perspective approaching the same material. The same thing with David. You know, when we talk about David, we talk about adultery and lust and, you know, the price you pay and all those kind of lessons. They're standard lessons you always hear.
Sure.
But tell the story through the eyes of Eliam. Eliam was Bathsheba's father. From his perspective, a king that has authority abused his authority, killed his son-in-law, and abused his daughter. How fond do you think Eliam was toward David after all that? And so now I've got a lesson of how difficult it is to forgive. You would never, that wouldn't be brought up from David and Bathsheba if you're looking at it through the eyes of David.
Right.
But if you look at it through the eyes of Eliam, you got a whole new lesson to talk about.
Yeah.
So there are so many stories in the Bible that if you just take a different character and view it from his perspective, it changes the points that you would deliver on that story. So it's not the same old, same old.
Yeah.
It's something fresh.
And it brings those stories to life, too. I mean, you can see, hey, this is real life stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so let me think. We need to read and listen to others. And we need, thank you. We need to, change up the way that we do things, our style, and then try and look over the shoulder of different people through Scripture and think about alternative ways, perhaps, to discuss those things. All right, number 4.
Well, I like to try to plan a getaway with some preacher friends. I've done that a few years with some preachers, and we get away and we organize it differently. We've done it differently, but we talk about sermon prep, and we sit down and we talk about and share ideas. And, you know, you can look at a passage and you see what you see in it, but the guy sitting next to you sees something you missed. And it's that, iron sharpens iron kind of a process. And so I really like, if you're able to round up a few friends and say, like, in November, let's spend a weekend and go to a place, turn our phones off, and just knock out some ideas, and talk about some things. That's been very helpful.
I never forget the first time that a group of us had done that. It was early in all of our time as preachers, and we had that realization that we were all dealing with or struggling with the same parts of ministry. Not a temptation thing, just like, time and all that stuff. Maybe even challenges common to all congregational ministries. And that was such in a backward sort of way, it was liberating. It was freeing to us to think, well, we're not the only ones going through this. I'm not the only one. Yeah. And to know, I've had guys come to me and say, I struggle with, like, what am I going to do next week? And it's just that. Well, so do I. You're not alone in that, and so. Sometimes you feel like you're the only one, and makes you wonder about your commitment to the Lord, or, am I cut out for this or whatever? Right. And that's the big thing, right? We don't want anybody to think that something that they're enduring, which is very common, and that doesn't diminish how difficult it is to endure, but we don't want somebody to think they need to quit because they think in their minds they're the only ones who deal with something. Right,
exactly.
Yeah. All right, number 5. We're talking about getting out of preaching ruts.
Number 5, I would offer this suggestion: avoid really long series when you preach. I remember when I first started preaching, there was a guy that he was came. We had a preachers meeting. He came and he said, "I'm on week 47 of the book of Job."
Whoa.
And I thought, I don't know, those people are going to be given an abundant entrance into heaven, I'm pretty sure, for listening to that. But you can, try to make your series more reasonable and don't go really long periods of time. Mm-hmm. And that's even true of Bible classes. We do quarterly at Carnes, and sometimes I don't like that, but For the most part, I think it's probably good, because if not, we'll have these long, drawn-out things that go too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Week 47. I'm going to preach a series on Jeremiah and Lamentations. What an encouraging year. I don't mean to.
I know what
you
you're
know what
saying.
I mean.
Everybody knows what you're saying.
Those books are there for a reason.
Right,
All right. Anyway.
right.
Okay. And, sometimes, have you ever found yourself like you're in a series and maybe it's not too long, but it's not going the way. Yeah, it's not going the way you thought it would, or maybe it's not resonating, or it's not clicking. Anyway,
I will tell you one thing about doing series, shorter series of sermons. They will help you tremendously in the week by week preparation. One of the biggest problems is, well, what do I preach next week? And you already have that answer.
Yes.
And so it is a help, and that gives you freshness too, to know all I have to do is just do the outline and not think about what I'm doing.
That's true. Yeah. All right. Number 6. This is the last one.
This is the last one that I have. Yeah. Illustrate. Dryness sometimes comes just because you haven't done Jesus illustrated more than we probably are aware of. The Sermon on the Mount, I had to do a lesson out in Oklahoma once on preaching like Jesus, and so I took the Sermon on the Mount, and you can read that through in about 20 minutes. So it's about the length of a sermon that we would preach. And Jesus used, and I asked the students in one of the classes that I teach, I always ask them, how many sermons do you think, or sermon illustrations do you think Jesus used in that sermon? And they'll say, I'm catching them cold, and they'll say, I don't know, 10, 15, try more than 40.
Wow.
And I'm not saying do 40 illustrations in your sermon, but I am saying there is power in illustrating, and Jesus implemented that. This spring I have to teach on the illustrations in the book of James. James is filled with illustrations. Think about the fire and the tongue and the bitter water and all those, those topics that he talks about.
Yeah.
So illustrations make your sermons memorable. I've done some illustrations in sermons that when I meet somebody years later, they remember the sermon by the illustration.
Yeah.
If the illustration, if the illustration wasn't there, they would probably forget, the sermon. That's not saying the illustration is more important than the content of your sermon, but it helps you to remember the content of the sermon. So if you're not spending enough time researching, thinking about, illustrating the major points that you make in a sermon, spend more time at that, and I think that'll help your sermons to come up more alive. When I'm preaching, sometimes you can look out and everybody's kind of their heads down, they're looking at their Bible and stuff, and then you say, I once knew a guy who, and everybody's head goes up. You're going to tell them something that they're not familiar with.
Right.
And that application from, a parable, to lay it along beside, I think it invigorates your sermons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Jesus was the master at that. Sometimes that's hard. We need to do an episode on illustrations too. I think we've done one before, but gathering, collecting, it's kind of like just something you just have to be thinking about all the time.
You do. Yeah. And I'll tell you a hint that may help guys is Flipboard, the app on your phone.
Yeah.
And it's just a news aggregator. And every morning I just kind of flip through the headlines. I tell it what I'm interested in, and it'll bring those topics in, and I don't have to go looking for it. And just by flipping topics, I get all kind of sermon ideas and illustrations for my lessons.
I forgot about Flipboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around a while.
It has.
Yeah. That helps you think maybe it's not going anywhere too, which is
I know.
Just as soon as you find a tool you like that's an app, it's gone.
It's off.
Or the company sells it.
Yeah.
Or whatever. 6 things that'll help us get out of preaching ruts, and a lot of it, and I like the way you said, just think differently about some aspect of your sermon, whether it's illustrating or the way you approach a text or even the way you present that sermon. can reignite us and make us feel a little better and get us out of that rut a little bit.
If I can go ahead and add a seventh, I would just say don't be lazy.
Okay.
Laziness is, you can get in a rut without being lazy, but if you are lazy, you will be in a rut.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have anything to offer because you haven't done your work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's real easy to be lazy, and the reputation that sometimes preachers have is that of being lazy, because there have been some who, because of the lack of oversight and the lack of accountability, they've abused it. And we certainly don't want to do that. In fact, I mean, I constantly am thinking of the fact that I have to give an account to God someday, you know, for the time that I have and for the gift that the brethren have made to allow me to do what I do.
Yeah.
And so I want to make the best use of that time, and that will help you to stay out of some of those ruts and dry spells.
And then, the Lord willing, if you're able to stay there and minister among those people and work alongside of them for an extended period of time, be that 12 years or 21 years or whatever, that freshness, you know, you don't want it where, okay, he's preaching baptism. Well, I know exactly what he's going to say.
Right, right. Yeah.
or you certainly don't want it where everything he says end up somehow being his baptism sermon.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I don't know. He started over here with Eliam, but somehow he wound up with baptism. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate you very much and the work you all are doing at Southeast Institute and at Carnes. I know that it's a congregation that means a lot to a lot of people, and perhaps for a variety of reasons, either as preaching students or as students at there's a nearby university there, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and some other things.
We do have a lot of, we have really good college students that come to Carnes. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. We appreciate you. And thanks
thank you for
carving some time.
me.
I know you're busy around here this week at the
right.
lectureship, and so we appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us, too.
I've enjoyed it.
We appreciate all of you for being a part of our episode today, and thanks to our listener who requested this week's topic, and we want to continue to receive those. preachers@thelightnetwork.tv is that email address where you can submit your episode ideas, and we'll put them on the list and get to them just as soon as we can. Don't forget, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Just search Preachers in Training. Brand new episodes released each Thursday from those podcast partners or our website, thelightnetwork.tv. Thanks for being with us today. Until next time, let's go preach the word.